Oh, welcome everyone, live from Washington, D.C. It's Richard and Glynnis. So we're going to get started here in about 3 minutes. And so when we say we're live from Washington, D.C., we're really live from Washington, D.C. So thank you for joining us. Actually, since we are in a conference room, I would really appreciate it if you can find that question panel and you can type in that you can hear us okay. That would be really great. So if you find the question panel, because it's also good because you're going to be asking questions hopefully throughout the presentation, and just type in that you can hear us. We'd appreciate that. And we're going to get started here in about 2 minutes at the top of the hour.
Mason said he can hear us.
Okay, excellent.
Thanks, Mason.
Every time I do that, I always think of Romper Room, which I know it's an old reference, but it's like we had Miss Linda. I don't know if you had someone else.
Don't put me in this boat with you. I don't know what you're talking about.
All right. I'm sure people on the call remember Romper Room, where there was the mirror. Or maybe you don't, but there was a show called Romper Room where she held up, or usually it was a she held up a mirror and she's like, I see Richard and I see Glynnis, and she would call out names and it would always be so exciting to hear your name.
What is the TikTok equivalent to that?
What's TikTok? So we're really very happy that you joined us today. We're going to be switching places here and we're going to be monitoring the question panel. So please type questions into the question panel. People always ask, is this being recorded? Yes, it is being recorded, and that will be available after the presentation. Any good questions coming in yet?
Not yet, but we are going to be covering some tips today at the top of the presentation, and we would love to know if any of them are your favorites or if you have different tips that you'd like to recommend. We voted internally on our favorite sort of unsung hero tips within Ideate Software, and so that's what we'll be presenting at the top.
Yep, and actually that's a good segue into, we have a very short survey at the end of the presentation. One of the questions is, what tips what are your favorite tips from Ideate Software Solutions? So there's only 4 questions. It's really short. So we'd very much appreciate if you fill out that survey. It helps us to focus these presentations to basically provide what you're asking for, but also make sure that they're relevant.
Hey, I think it's time to start. So
okay,
we should turn off our picture.
All right, so you can see we're live. We're at a WeWork facility. I'm going to go over here and see if I can actually pause that, but then, just stop the webcam. There we go. We'll start. There we go. Okay, and I'm going to put that up here, and we will do that. All right. So again, welcome everyone to Live from Washington, D.C. Unlock the time-saving features with Revit with Ideate Software. My name is Richard Taylor, and I have the director of Ideate Software here, Glynnis Patterson.
Hey, Richard. Hey, everyone. So,
of course, always feel free to contact us with any questions or technical questions. Glynnis's contact information is there. So is my contact information. I'm always happy to connect with people on LinkedIn. For me, my middle initial is W, because Richard and Taylor are both very common names. So if you search for me or just search for me and Revit, usually I come up. Anna, do you have a tip on yours? How to find you easily?
I'm one of a kind.
So okay.
GVP in New Jersey.
So many of you know who Ideate Software is. I want to just highlight a couple things here, and that is our excellent support. So you can go to www.ideatesoftware.com. You can find all the resources, but then you can also send an email to support@ideatesoftware.com. Now you might see there in the upper left-hand corner of this screen is the Ideate Software GreyTech group. So about 3 weeks ago, we made the announcement that we are now part of the GreyTech group. We're really super excited about that. It gives us so many more resources to expand around the world. But for those of you that are existing customers, I want you to know that that support email is the same, the website is the same, and nothing has changed in that regard. Currently, we are supporting Revit 2020 through 2024. We have a slide here in a second where we're going to be talking about our new updates, but I'll leave that for just a second. And notice that we have a couple links there, the YouTube playlist and then the problem solution videos. But we also have this new series called 15 at 15. It's every other week on Fridays at 2:15 Eastern or 11:15 Pacific time in the United States. You can go to our events page and you can basically sign up to have that link or have the Outlook link on your calendar. So you don't really need to register. It's basically just a link that you can click on, go right to go-to meeting. And so that's available like every 2 weeks. We're also recording those. So if you want to see like from YouTube, if I click on this 15 at 15 series, we started this about a couple months ago, I think, right, Glynnis?
Yeah.
And so we've got a few of these, and we're going to be continuing to do this for the remainder of the year. So let's go back to the presentation here. So I'd encourage you to go to our ideatesoftware.com website, go to events, and you can basically copy that Outlook information that has the link for the 15 at 15 series. So our current software selections, as I mentioned, are available on Revit 2020 through 2024. And the last update that we did was in November. And so on our website, you see that we updated Ideate BIMLink, we updated IdeateApps and Ideate Automation. We are currently working very diligently to come out with 2025, but also update our software on the previous 3 versions. So that means 2022 through 2025. So that's going to be coming in June. So we wanted to mention that. You know, we're working very hard on getting the sort of what's new videos and of course all of the QA and QC that we're doing for those software solutions for Ideate Sticky, BIMLink, Explorer, StyleManager, Apps, and Automation. Okay, so today we've got the presentation kind of split into 2 main areas. The first area, Glynnis is going to give you a top 10 tips and features of Ideate software that are, most of them are fairly new that you may not be aware of. And so she's going to go into sort of details about that. And then the second half of the presentation, I'm going to be talking about Ideate Automation. And if you haven't seen that, that is our latest solution that allows you to script a whole series of different tasks. And so we'll be talking about how you can create PDFs or DWG drawings or IFC or Navisworks, and so that you can basically allow that to script it and schedule it so they can run when your computer has downtime. Typically, that's overnight. So with that, I'm going to switch it over here to Glynnis. We're going to do a fire drill.
Thanks, Richard. Appreciate it. As I think we mentioned at the very top, we do have a question panel on the right-hand side of your screen within the go-to toolbar there. We'd love to hear from you throughout the presentation. We are going to be giving, as I mentioned, some top 10 tips. If you like any of them in particular, we'd love to know. If there's other ones you want to promote to our list of top 10, we'd also love to hear that. So I'm going to start with some BIMLink tips. And for those of you who are not familiar with BIMLink, just a real quick review of what BIMLink is. It's our data management tool that it can be used to extract data out of the Revit model, put it into Excel, where you can use that to just review that data, or more importantly, you can edit that data and then push the changes back into the Revit model. So it's a great tool for doing mass edits of data and also for accessing a lot of data that Revit schedule itself cannot display to you. And it can be used to do a lot more than that. Some of the other examples are sort of alluded to on the screen here. One, for example, is you can also create new things with BIMLink, like a sheet or a room or spaces from rooms or types and so on and so forth. So we'll get a little bit into that, but that's what BIMLink does. And so one of our tips that we wanted to share with you, that again, this is sort of a new feature. I think we added this one in November. This is because somebody probably on this call or in our beta group recommended that we consider adding access to the properties that relate to a sheet or a view and which sheet or view set they belong to. So in BIMLink, if you're interested in finding the sample content, is called sheet underbar sets or view underbar sets. And those are basically new properties that we're creating on the fly for views or sheet elements that will let you make edits to those. So the example here, and this is a great workflow that I love, the column, there's two columns here that are shown in the BIMLink context. The one on the left says sheet view sets, and then it gives you the name of the sheet view set, which is schematic design. And then on the right-hand side, next to it, is actually the revision sequence. And so what we can see here is there's a discrepancy between these two different ideas, but related ideas, right? One is about the revision or issuance, and that's the information that shows up on the tool, on the title block, right? That's the sequence number. And then the actual print, the PDF or the DWG set that we want to export. And we can use this to align those two different ideas. So if you're someone who has to manage these and they're getting out of sync frequently, this is a great new function that you can access in BIMLink. Just type the word set in as we're showing here, and you'll be able to find that new content.
Wasn't that, it's very similar to the revision sequences that we create that property kind of on the fly.
Exactly.
Isn't it?
Yeah. Yep. So when you start that particular link, it's going to bring in project specific content. Yeah, you're absolutely right. True. All right. So tip number 9. This is one that I love. This is something that came up, I think, at AU a year and a half ago. And what we're looking at here is the wall assembly, like the layers in a wall, right? And I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with that idea. And what we were asked to do was to be able to give access to that kind of information, right? It's very different than the wall type information. It's the layers inside the wall. So we see here, that's exactly what we're doing. This happens to be about walls. And you can see here, there's a plasterboard material there that we can display and make a different choice for. So we're going to export all that layer information for all the wall types in this project. And then we're going to use Excel to find the plasterboard. And maybe our action item is to change all the plasterboards or some of the plasterboards to instead a gypsum wallboard material. And of course, that has some bearing potentially on embodied carbon analysis if it was concrete, and also if it was an external property or external layer, it might have an impact on rendering even. So staying on top of the material assignments is valuable in a lot of different contexts, whether it's just sort of keeping your standards clean or whether you really are chasing down embodied carbon analysis. We think this is a really important part of those kinds of workflows. And so you can see here the result of doing that is it also, of course, changed the sort of the keynote tag here that is displaying the actual material. So this is the example that we just walked through there. That was for walls, but it does apply to floors, ceilings, roofs, and slab assemblies. And that was, we love that kind of request. I think it came to us at AU, right? There was a presentation at AU, I think, and a couple different people kind of came to our booth and said, hey, we really want to get on board and do a better job at doing embodied carbon analysis. But the fundamental part of that is that our models are accurate to begin with. We can't do an analysis if the data's not good. So love that idea. And our team was able to kind of turn that around fairly quickly, I think. We got that out about 6 months later. So thank you for that idea. Tip number 8 for BIMLink is that we are adding, as always, new create workflows. For those of you who used BIMLink before, you know that there's our library here that has a folder called Create Elements. In that library, there's all sorts of goodies in here where you can use an Excel file to create entities. And so in this, some of the newer things that we've added are the ability to create plan views, area plan views, viewports, which means literally placing a view on a sheet via Excel. That means we have coordinate data for the sheet itself. It's kind of weird, but very powerful, and unplaced views as well. So I'm going to roll right into the next tip. This one is for our data nerds like myself. I'd be curious to know if anybody likes this one. This is a very powerful idea. Many of you know that BIMLink uses an ID field to map data. And what you might not know is that you can choose a different key to map your data against. And so the way you would do that is you would right click and set a different data key as shown in the screenshot here. And the reason you might want to do that, there are a couple of examples are listed here on the slide. You can import type data from one Excel file into many different Revit files. The family and type ID might actually be different across those files, but with this functionality, you can sort of ignore the fact that the type ID is different and still bring in that data. It's also really great for importing room or sheet data because those underlying element IDs can change over the course of a project, and you can just use the name itself as the key.
Yeah, and I was working with a couple different architecture firms that they were working on a project together. They had a consultant that was a door hardware consultant. And in that case, they didn't want to key the information based on the Revit element ID. Yep. They wanted to do it on the family and type so that the door consultant could fill out that information very easily. And I think it worked out great for that.
Yep, exactly. All right, so for our StyleManager friends, if you're not familiar with StyleManager, this is a really important tool in the arsenal of all BIM managers. It's something that could be used both in a project and a family file and a template file for that matter. And it's used to analyze and merge and delete what we call very broadly styles. And what we mean by styles is things like object styles and line styles, which probably do come to mind, but also things like materials, filled regions, filters, view templates, viewports. Revit doesn't tell you that these things are in use or not. So it will let you delete them. And we don't think that's a good idea. So StyleManager will help you understand if these things are in use. If they're not in use, obviously, if you want to delete them, then you can easily and safely delete them. But you can also merge them. You can take, 20 different materials, for example, and say, make all of these materials actually combine into my specified material. So it's a very powerful tool. And what we wanted to let you know from a tip standpoint is that we recently added information about parameters to StyleManager. So it's a new collection within StyleManager. It's a family parameter or a nested parameter if you're working inside of an RFA file. And if you're working inside of a project file, it's parameters, meaning shared or project parameters. And also there's a separate one for global parameters. So in those cases, again, it's going to help you understand whether those parameters are in use or not. I do want to mention we are not yet merging parameters. I know that's a key feature a lot of people would love to be able to do. It's very complicated. You can imagine merging, a dimension into a text or a text into a dimension might be a bit of a challenge. But we do hope to make some improvements there. So right now you're going to be auditing the parameters. Are they in use? And if they're not, you're going to be able to safely delete them. All right, now let's move on to IdeateApps. For those of you who are not familiar with IdeateApps, this is a collection of 10 tools, starting with Renumber as shown here and off to the right with View Creator at the end, that are really designed for everyday Revit use. There's a lot in here, and we don't have time to cover all of them today, but some of the functionality is listed here on the screen. What we want to talk about today is some of the newer items that are inside of IdeateApps. So there's a tool called Annotate, Ideate Annotate, that is part of IdeateApps. It's the newest tool that we've added. When did we add that, Richard? Like a year and a half ago, I think?
Yeah, I was gonna say a year and a half to 2 years ago.
Okay, so it's been around for a while. We've had great response to this tool, so we keep adding to it and refining it. So we appreciate everybody who has helped us make it better. I'll give you an example. The screen that we're looking at here is called, the tip is about review clashes, which I'll get to in a second. It's the second one in orange there shown. But on the review tab within Annotate is a list of approximately 10, I should know how many, different kinds of annotative problems. And these are things like you've got a blank tag as an example. And we're helping you identify these problems and then zoom and deal with these problems inside of your model, just like you would in Explorer. So it's sort of like we're creating warnings, but it's specific to annotation. It's really about, is your set ready to go to publish or to print? And so one of those issues, as we call them, is a clash issue, and it's an annotation clash, not a model clash. That's a different, more complicated thing. It's an annotation clash, and you can see an example of it here. So what we're able to do, which I think is just super exciting, is we're able to find in this example on the screen, it's a tag, right, and the dimension, and they're making it unreadable, right, because they're clashing. So in this case, it's showing you that. You would double click on the dimension or double click on the 1/4 inch, which is the tag name. It'll take you to the view, and then you can move it and clean up that problem. So we're really excited, and we hope that you get a chance to kind of play with that within the Annotate tool. The other tool that's also inside of Annotate that is definitely unsung, Richard and I, we were presenting this yesterday to some customers here in DC, and there was a real positive reaction here. This is a tool that will let you align and distribute tags, text, and keynotes. So we're using a function here where we're filtering on just those element types, and then we're choosing align left, and then we're picking the thing that we want to align to. That can be one of the other texts, or it can be a reference line, or another tag to align to. And that can be a left align, right align, or a center align. Hand in hand with that, we have a distribute function. So the other drop-down tool there is distribute vertically, which is mostly what I'm doing when I'm doing it. And it's just going to evenly space those elements that you're picking. So that's super exciting. We have videos, the detailed videos and help content on how to use this information. So please refer to our help pages on that if you're looking to learn a little bit more about that. So that's number 4. Tip number 3 is also very new. We're very excited about this. We have been wanting for a long time to add a tool, kind of like our renumber tool, that would be rule-based and help you do a more efficient job at the active tagging, which is, I don't know, in my mind, pretty onerous task, but important part of annotation and documentation. So what we're doing is we're providing a rule-based system for tags, and the screenshot here, what we're looking is the definition of the rule about pipes. So our pipe long rule, as an example here, lets us specify, what is the tag type, how is it placed, and on the right-hand side, what are the rules that define which pipes we want to tag. So in this particular example, we're saying, hey, if it's longer than 4 feet and it's not sloped, then we want to tag it with that particular tag. So there's a lot of ways we can take this, and I'll give you a couple examples that kind of illuminate how this works. So this is a very simple example of tagging casework. This is the out-of-the-box Revit behavior. If you were to do a tag all, it would look like this. If you were to use our out-of-the-box, we have 2 different rules for casework as examples. You could do casework uppers and casework lowers. You could do them at the same time. In this case, we're able to know, is it an upper or is it a lower? And we're able to place the tag differently based on the element itself. So you can just get a lot more predictable outcome. And when we talk about something like walls, here again this is the out-of-the-box example. In this view, there's 188 tags that are the result of a tag all walls. That's because Revit is going to tag all visible walls and all curtain walls, and they're all going to have the same exact tag and the same exact choice for the position and orientation. With the Annotate out of the box, sorry, I shouldn't use acronyms. Sorry.
Yeah, that's good.
I broke my cardinal rule there. But the out of the box rule from Annotate, Ideate Annotate, is going to result in 107 tags, and that's because our out of the box rule already decides that, we shouldn't tag curtain walls. They're kind of different critter. We're also going to ignore walls if there is no type mark. Maybe that's an intentional decision you've made. And we're also going to ignore walls in groups. And you can change all those things, but that's just an example of some of the things you can do with the wall tags. And then if you want to take it a little bit further, you could add some other rules about, the type mark. Like if it has a certain letter in the type mark, don't tag it, because maybe that's getting tagged on a different view. So there's a lot of ways that you can probably dial in these custom rules to get the results you want. And here's an example for our structural friends on the call. In this example, we have both a concrete column and a steel column that are both shown in this view. And so this is the tag all result. You can see there in some cases, things are actually tagged on top of each other. And so with the annotate, you can see you can have a rule we've provided as an example. You can have one rule that's if the column's made out of concrete, tag it one way, and if it's not made out of concrete, tag it another way. So the example here is that one is upper, the steel is the upper, and the concrete is lower. So you get a nice layout of those two different tags in this particular view. We're also ignoring all cords and webs in our rules to get some cleaner output for the framing. In addition to those sort of rule-based things, there's a couple other items I want to note about tagging that we love. Here we're going to tag rooms, and the rule is saying ignore small rooms in this example. And you'll notice at the top of the screen, there is a checkbox option that would let me tag elements in all open views. So in this case, I'm simultaneously tagging all the rooms that are bigger than 100 square feet in all three of those views. So that's an option. And then additionally, we do support tagging across linked files. So in this example, we're in the MEP file as an example, and we want to tag the rooms, and we're going to do it in all of the open views, and we're going to grab the elements from the linked files, and we're tagging the rooms. So both of those things are an option. Remember, if you have any questions, we're standing by.
I've typed a couple of times in the chat. Right. I think that's what that flashing is that I've typed. Don't forget the question panel.
Nice. All right. Well, we're getting down to our final two tips here, and then we'll turn it over to the automation presentation. Tip number 2 is that we have added recently within View Creator. If you're not familiar, View Creator is a very powerful tool, part of IdeateApps, can be used to batch create views. And when we do that, we're talking about providing, logical choices for the names of those views and decisions about the scope box and the crop boundaries and so forth. So it's very powerful. I could talk for 8 hours just on sort of all the value there. But the specific change that we wanted to mention is this new option called room views. And the way that the room views works, the idea is that we're going to present here a list of all of the rooms in the project, and you can sort them by level and phase and then make a decision. And it does support linked views. In this case, we're just picking a single room. And then again, we're picking a rule in this example. And the rule tells us, how it should be named and whether it should be put on a sheet and what those view types should be like. And then it's going to generate automatically views for that room. So in this particular example, we're going to do 4 elevations, a 3D view, and a call out. And it's going to give it names that are provided by the rule. You can change them on the fly if you want to. And again, that doesn't have to go on a sheet, but if you want to go on a sheet, the rule says, in this particular case, the rule said put it on a sheet, and it's going to array them and lay them out within the title block area. So that's something that's kind of new that we've added, and I know a lot of our customers, particularly the architectural customers, obviously, have really appreciated that one. So our last tip, and this one's my favorite, for those of you who aren't familiar with Explorer, this is sort of our most fundamental tool. I use this tool every single day. It's great for project auditing, but it's also just great for moving in your Revit model. So Explorer is a model navigation tool and an on-demand data review tool. And the way it works is it's going to display a bunch of elements, and then you can double click and zoom and go to that view, and then you can make edits in Revit to those things. The tip that I wanted to mention for those of you who are familiar with Explorer is that we've added the ability to create custom filters that are rule-based, and we call these dynamic filters. So in this example, we've set up a piping rule for our MEP friends, and we said, find any piping fittings that are irregular. And we're specifying in a very narrow tolerance in this example what we mean by that. And so you can see here, it's got a list in this project. There's 14 that are non-standard. They're not quite 90 degrees. And so then I can double click, zoom to the view, and see in the properties palette there that indeed this one is 89.4 degrees, which is going to be a problem. And so the idea is that you can build sort of rules in your project, have it available to find certain conditions either that you don't, that you're trying to make sure you don't have from an auditing standpoint, or because you need to select the same kind of elements over and over again, like maybe curtain panels of a certain type. I'll mention that there are out-of-the-box sort of basic rules that are filter rules for Explorer, and this is the list of the ones that ship with the product. So when you test drive Explorer, if you have the latest version, again, that would be for 2020 and forward, you would see these rules loaded into your project. And an example would be like this one is called MC in place. So MC stands for multi-category. This is what the rule looks like. So the categories themselves, you can dial it in, but it's going to display on the left-hand side all the possible categories. And then the property is this, you might find this familiar from BIMLink, right? This is is in place property is true. So we have that rule, and you can use that out of the box. There's also bonus rules. These are ones that you would have to go to the cog in Explorer and pick manage filter rules, and then you could load these in from the bonus folder. So they're not going to automatically load. And the reason is these are a little more either discipline specific or maybe require some custom parameter values. But there's some pretty interesting things in the bonus rules as well. So like wall has an edited profile, or the keynote's missing, or the glass orientation can show you wall, panels that are in a wall that has a certain orientation. But the wall has edited profile as an example. If I loaded that, you could choose it from the filter in Explorer. In this project, you can see that there are actually 9 walls in the entire project. You can select them all at the same time, and then you could choose to use the isolate function to kind of like zoom and find those particular things. Look, Richard, it is 12:29.
Perfect.
I am done.
Okay, actually, you can actually answer the last question there too. I thought this was actually good for Mariana. I thought maybe you could answer it sort of, it's certainly relevant. Concerning the room views, it was asked if we could do that from a linked model. And I said the room element, or I should say the room bounding can be in the link, but the room element itself, does that need to be in the parent?
No,
even the room element.
That's the newer feature. Okay. Initially that was true, Richard, but then the latest version, because everybody asked the same good question, we did change that. So look for the option in the toolbar in the View Creator tool itself. There's a new checkbox that says support for link views, and when you have that, it's going to display rooms that are in the child file. And the boundaries can actually be partially in the parent and partially in the child. They can be all in the parent, or excuse me, all in the child or all in the parent. It's very complicated, but we did do all of those combinations.
Excellent. And the last question as we do the switch, it was just, since you ended on talking about the rules, is there a location with all the rules on our website?
Sure. That question's from our friend Michelle. Hey, Michelle, nice to hear from you. That's a great question. So the tag rules, we're talking about tag rules and Explorer filters. Yeah, they are enumerated. Yes, they are enumerated on our help page, and I will dig them up and send them out. But if you were to look on Explorer and filters, if you were to Google Ideate Explorer filter rules, I bet you would find that list enumerated there. Thank you. Your turn, Richard.
Excellent. Yeah, actually, you made it easy for me because there weren't a lot of questions. So now I want you to make it really hard for Glynnis. I want you to type a lot of questions for Glynnis. See if you can stump her, which is probably impossible, I'm sure. So the second part of the presentation, we really want to focus on, I think this is kind of a tip too, but it's really the unlocking the time savings of our latest solution called Ideate Automation. So what is Ideate Automation? Well, it's really the first solution that we have that is not a add-in in the sense of on the ribbon panel. So if you were to go and try to find Ideate Automation on the ribbon panel, you're not going to find it because it is a desktop application that allows you to script tasks, and you can run those tasks when it's convenient. Like I said, typically overnight or when there's downtime for the computer. So it can actually use Ideate BIMLink and Explorer and StyleManager and apps, or if you don't have those solutions, there are so many tasks that you can do, for instance, exporting PDF or exporting DWG or IFC or Navisworks, or even just scheduling the open of a Revit model. So you see here, I've kind of encapsulated a little bit of like opening large files before you get to your desk. So if something like a Revit model open takes 2 hours with all the link files, you could schedule that to open at, let's say, 4 in the morning. And so when you get in the office at 6 or 7, it's already there waiting for you. I'm going to talk also about exporting data for, COBE, which is more of a European focus probably, but doing our DIR, which is our document issue records, our QTO, quantity takeoff, a lot of the acronyms here, Glynnis, as we said. No, this is all for us. And then, of course, being able to export in PDF, Navisworks, NWC, IFC, that's the Industry Foundation class, or DWG. So if you don't have any Ideate software solutions, and I can't imagine why that would be possible, but you can certainly use Ideate Automation as a sort of a standalone in the sense of with just Revit to do all of these tasks that you see on the screen. Mostly exporting, file maintenance, auditing type of tasks, and as I said, scheduling and open. If you do have Ideate software solutions, then you have the ability, I'm going to talk about like sort of dynamic exporting where you can use Ideate BIMLink to actually define the list of sheets. You can do a health check, which is going to use Ideate BIMLink, Explorer, IdeateApps. And then with Ideate StyleManager, you can review, for instance, family sizes and some other tasks specifically with that particular product. Okay, so the interface, when you first call it up on the desktop, it's going to show you a list of sort of scheduled tasks and completed tasks, and you have this home page, and I'm going to go over this in just a second. And then you have a create. And just if you're very familiar with Ideate BIMLink, very similar, like I said, just like Ideate BIMLink, where we have our link definitions, you will see that there are scripts that are available that are organized where you don't need any Ideate software, and then those scripts that do require Ideate software solutions. So why don't we take a quick look at the interface? I'm going to switch over here, and we're going to go to Ideate Automation. And so like I said, on the home here, it's basically showing me tasks that I have already run. If I want to set up a quick task, I go to Create, and here's where it gives me, like I said, the selections. And you'll notice that if I come down here to Publishing, I have Publish and Combine. It'll tell you exactly what is required. For export PDF, we do require Revit 2022 and any forward versions. So you'll see that with AutoCAD, it's actually saying that we have 2020 for export DWG. So it's going to tell you, like in this case, if I go to Health Check, it says it requires automation, it requires BIMLink, Explorer, and IdeateApps. So there's always a nice little description of what that particular task does. So let's go back to my publishing tasks here. We're going to select that we're going to do a real simple PDF combined. So once I select on the task, I would select Next, and here's where I can choose some inputs. One of those inputs is going to be, what model do I want to use? So I'm going to come out here to Browse, and notice that I can browse my live cloud model on Autodesk Construction Cloud. I can do recent files, or I can say, well, I want to see these models that are on our ACC hub, or I can specify local models, which are either on a network drive, like a Dropbox drive, or my C drive. And in this case, I have a very simple sample file. You probably used this before, the Revit sample file for structure from Autodesk. So I'm going to select that file, and then that file itself isn't even work shared. So I'm going to close this, this link, meaning that you have the option to say, oh, all links or all work sets that have the *.link is the name. I want to close those. This is very good for like point clouds, like I said, linked files, things that you don't really need to have open because it's time consuming to open all those. You can also use a list. So I can select one model, I can select multiple models, or I can tick this use file list where it's a text file that basically has the list of all of the Revit models that I want to perform this action on. So now I'm going to pick a folder that I want this to go to. So pretty simple. I just have my desktop. I have this folder called PDF output. So I'll select that. And the last thing I'm going to do is, this is a static sheet set, meaning that it's defined within Revit. So everyone probably is familiar with the view and sheet sets within Revit. I have something called set one. And I'm going to talk about how we, in a minute, a dynamic. But right now, I'm kind of using this sheet set that's already defined within Revit. We also have an optional PDF export. So if you go to the export settings in Revit, you will see that there is an export settings that you can save off. And so therefore, if you want to have an optional setup for the PDF export, you can put this, or if you just leave it blank, that's fine. It's going to pick the default. So now I've got all of my inputs, and I would select next, and it's ready to go. So it basically gives me the command script, and so now I say save and run. So it's now running automatically. It chose, or it knew that particular Revit structure file was in Revit 2023. So it's opening up the appropriate version of Revit, in this case, Revit 2023, and it's going to then perform the task that I asked it. So in this case, we're exporting a combined PDF of the sheet set called set one. And I like to use this model because it's a very small model. It performs pretty quickly. And the actual sheet set itself is only 5 sheets. So you can actually see now so this can run overnight. It's going to run, so I can schedule this to run. I'm going to have then a completed PDF when I get into the morning. So you can actually see there down below in the status bar, it's saying that it's exporting the first title sheet, and then it usually just takes a few minutes to export the other sheets in this particular set. So like I said, we've done a lot of work when it comes to suppressing pop-ups. We do have some FAQ on our website of, I will say one specific thing that I can remember is with ProjectWise from Bentley. We have some issues where we can't suppress some of those pop-ups. So there is an FAQ to disable ProjectWise before running a particular task. That's just one example. All right, so this is actually usually after the first title sheet, it goes pretty quickly here. And we're up at 90%, and then it's complete. Once it's complete, it closes Revit. You'll notice it still says running there, but we can say it's completed. And you have a right click, and I can actually, clone this task. I can look at the log file, which is very similar to a Revit journal file. But before I do that, I want to come back over here to my PDF output directory. So we are located, we are really live in Washington, D.C., I kid you not. So it's Eastern time. It is 12:40 p.m. And you can see the date on this file stamp is 4/24 at 12:40 p.m. We just created this Revit basic sample project set one. So I'm going to double click on that. And here we have the 5 sheets that are combined. And so you could do individual PDF sheets, or you can do a combined set like I just did. So that was created for me. I don't want to learn more, no, right now. So I'll close that and go back to Ideate Automation. And then as I scheduled, or as I mentioned about, we can schedule these tasks. So once I know that it's completed, it completed successfully, everything was great, exactly the way I wanted it. Well, then I can go ahead and either schedule, or I can right click and say schedule this task. And this is going to have a nice little interface to the Windows Task Scheduler. I can give it a name, and I'm going to call it my Washington, D.C. daily PDF. And then I can give it a start time that I would like this to run every night at 2 in the morning. And you can see I can do daily, weekly, monthly, and I can specify that information. So I'm basically going to say save. And then when I go to the schedule, you'll see that it's actually scheduled for my Washington, D.C. daily PDF. And it's going to be scheduled at 2 a.m. The next run is going to be at tomorrow, basically on 4/25. I also have a couple other things I scheduled this morning, which was basically an archive of a model that I have on the Autodesk Construction Cloud that I want to copy down to my local drive and have it save as a central model. So I can do that, and then I've got another PDF creation there. So you can see both the scheduled tasks and the completed tasks. So if I come back over here to home, there's this little tick mark. Actually, none of my scheduled tasks have run, so it's not going to change. But if I tick this, it's going to show both those scheduled ones that I did earlier on, if I've scheduled them, as well as the ones that I just completed.
Scott Blancha just asked, I think we covered his answer in the question panel, but he asked, can automation open an ACC BIM 360 model and do a save as to a network drive for weekly archiving, which is basically what you just said. So
exactly.
That was really good timing.
Yeah, perfect.
But hopefully that's clear.
Yeah. Yeah, and I do it almost every night.
Yeah. I also added that you can do an audit and compact at the same time. That's one of the options.
Yeah. So what this allows you to do, you saw this, basically I kind of like to go through that very simple example because it shows you sort of the basics. And you can see that then once that runs and it's completed successfully, you can then schedule that to run at a specific time. And speaking of, I mentioned this, we can also schedule an open, so you don't have to worry about, like, once you say, okay, here's the Revit model I want, and I want to schedule that so it opens up at 7 a.m. and it's going to then bring up the appropriate version of Revit and open that model. So you can just schedule all that, make it really easy. And then, of course, I showed you a simple example of PDF, but you can schedule an export of AutoCAD, of Navisworks, of IFC as well. And so let's go a little bit more in depth into some additional Ideate automation workflows that are enabled with Ideate software solutions. So I mentioned this a little bit earlier about this dynamic PDF. What does that mean, dynamic? Well, yeah, as I talked about earlier with the sheet set, I call that static, because if you have a whole list of A100 sheets and you added an A105, you have to remember to go add that A105 sheet to the sheet set specifically. But what if you used Ideate BIMLink instead, and you just said, you had a filter that said, give me all the A100 sheets. And if you happen to add A101 or A105 or A106 later on, it would just pick that up at the time that you're doing the PDF creation. So that's why we call that a dynamic. So what you can see here in the Ideate BIMLink definition, I've created a filter that says only pick up the schematic design sheets, the SD sheets that start with, I say placeholder is false, but the sheet number begins with S20. So it's going to give you all of those sheets. So let's take a look at that. So this can be very powerful. And with Ideate BIMLink, you can create so many different types of filters that are giving you exactly the sheets that you want. So in this case, I'm going to go to the scripts, which is the Ideate software script for PDF combined, right? And here's where I can browse to either a local model or a live or a Autodesk Construction Cloud model, I should say. And in this case, I'm also going to just keep the work sets where anything with a asterisk .link, I'm going to close that. And then I've got this sheet set called AUT for automation. And so you'll notice that it has those particular sheets that are in that sort of dynamic because it's saying only get the S200 sheets. And here's where I also mentioned you could do an optional export setup. Over to the right, there's this little plus sign. It's kind of hidden, but if you click on the plus sign, there are additional inputs. And one thing that's very key is notice that it's actually, there's a check mark that says always use external link definition. This means that that link definition called AUT sheets doesn't have to live inside the Revit model. It can be defined once, but used on 15 or 20 different Revit models. And so it's always going to pick up the S2 sheets for all those different models. So I'm going to hit save and run. So now it's going to run this, and then it's going to call up Ideate BIMLink basically in the background and use that sheet definition list to decide which particular sheets are going to be exported. So you see there, it's opening up the live model from the Autodesk Construction Cloud, just like I did earlier for my local model. And so we've sped this up a little bit, truncated it so that it runs, yeah, I know, it runs a little bit faster. So then when it's completed, right, again, I can always go and review the log file, but you can see it says completed here and the date and time that it was completed. And then I can sort of compare the results of the PDF, right, with that BIMLink definition. So you see, those are the ones that, those are the S200 sheets, right, which match, or the SD sheets, I should say. So that's the sheet number contains SD on that. So a great way, you know, we were just at an architecture firm yesterday where we were talking about how this is so beneficial to be able to create certain like check sets basically of either schematic design or certain sets, you know, all the, like I said, the A100 series or so forth. And as you saw, we have complete integration with the Autodesk Construction Cloud. If you haven't done this already, if you're already an Ideate Software or Ideate Automation customer, you can run through our cloud connector. And we have information online about that. What that does is it basically gives Ideate Automation the list of the models on your hub that you can review. And so we can pick basically which particular projects, as you see here, to refresh. And so we can, you know, integrate very easily and see all those models that you have on your hub. We can also use the recent list, which I've highlighted there to the right. I mean, this is very helpful. Sometimes you're working on a, let's say, a consultant's model, right, where you may not have access to their hub, but, or I should say, the automation doesn't have access to their hub because you've accessed maybe the MEP model from your consultant, as an example. And so you can use the recent list to still run a task with Ideate Automation. And then we can also publish information to the Autodesk Construction Cloud. Currently, the requirement, or I should say the restriction on ACC Publish is that you can only do it once a week and that you have to have admin access. But our solution allows you to schedule it basically whenever you'd like. You don't need to be an admin. You schedule that, it basically sends a signal up to the Autodesk Construction Cloud to be able to publish the information for the model. That's really nice. That was, I think, a direct request by one of our customers for that.
Yep.
And then Glynnis already kind of mentioned this a little bit, like, you know, you can do an audit and compact when you open a file, but you can also review the families either in a directory, or you can actually say for a model, like in this particular Revit model, like the structure model, I want to review all the families and the size of those families. So there's the family maintenance. We have two where the families RFA and then the families RVT. The RFA is looking at the families in a directory. The RVT is looking for the Revit model that's going to review the families that are loaded into that model.
Oh, you know what? We were talking yesterday, Richard, about someone was asking us if we included information about the images inside.
Oh, yeah.
And I did look it up. And even though it's not shown here on this screenshot, we did actually add that. We got a lot of great feedback from our beta testers, you know, on what kinds of properties that they want to see in this report. And so you can see there like nested families and a number of geometry elements as an example. But we did get some extra requests towards the end, which we added, and images is one of the fields. So we need to update that slide.
Yeah, that was a great question.
Yeah.
They wanted to find out all the image, or because I think, wasn't their example was that someone had included an image that was huge, yeah, and then it got replicated around 100 different times, yeah, and then they didn't realize why their model was like 10 times the size it should be.
That one, yep.
And so with Ideate BIMLink, if you're familiar with that, you know that we can export link definitions, and we can build a link definition based on a schedule. So using Ideate Automation, you can basically take any of those link definitions that might have been built from schedules or from BIMLink definitions and be able to export that, like I said, across multiple Revit models and you know, multiple, let's say, exports. this is something that we referenced at the very beginning of the presentation when Glynnis was talking about the sheet sets. If you haven't looked at this particular workflow, I would certainly encourage you to. We have a lot of videos, we have help topic, and if you are an Ideate BIMLink and Ideate Sticky user, actually specifically Ideate BIMLink, you can request a template for what we call the DIR, the document issue record. And so this template is an Excel file that allows you to export the revisions, the revision sequences, and the revisions on sheet, and the revision numbering, all to a spreadsheet like you see on the screen here. And it does it in a very nice tabular format. With Revit, you can only, in a schedule the current revision on a sheet. That's the limitation of Revit. But with this, it allows you to look at the current revision, but any previous revisions on a sheet as well. And so I'll just say, if you want to, all you need to do is go to send an email to Ideate Software, support at ideatesoftware.com and request the DIR template, and we will send that out to you if you are a current Ideate BIMLink customer.
That's my number 11 tip. That workflow.
Yeah,
right?
That would be good.
That's a really popular workflow with a lot of our customers. So I would agree. Send a request. Existing customers should send a request for that.
And even if you obviously don't have Ideate Automation, you can still, it's a very popular workflow with Ideate BIMLink, and then you're able to take the results of that Excel and then link it into the Revit model via Ideate Sticky. But then sort of tacking on top of that, Ideate Automation allows you to do this automatically, where you could take all of your revisions, the revisions on sheet, and export that out every single evening, so that that information is always up to date. And of course, we can also do, quantity takeoffs. This is another spreadsheet that we have, or an Excel file that we include with Ideate BIMLink under the construction folder for the samples, is a QTO. It has a series of pivot tables that basically summarizes the information. So as you see here to the right, it's basically exporting out all the elements of Revit, and then it's summarizing that in a very nice way with just using simple pivot tables with Excel. Now here's our model health check. And as I mentioned, in Ideate BIMLink, we have this directory called HC, standing for health check. And all of these, as you see, from dimensions all the way down to views, can be exported out via Ideate Automation. We can also use Ideate Explorer, which has the warnings information, all the elements that have warnings, and whether those warnings are high, medium, or low ranked information, and export that out to the spreadsheet. And so you see here that I've got 562 warnings. I want to export that information. And then Glynnis talked about at the very beginning, when she was talking about Ideate Annotate, the clashes that appear on a sheet. So the number of sheets and then those clashes can also be exported and reviewed from this template. So let's just take a quick look at that. So this is our automation health check. So very similar, I'm going to go to create. I'm going to select now the lower part of the dialog, which are those scripts that require Ideate software. And so this is going to use Ideate BIMLink, Ideate Explorer, and Ideate Apps, which is the piece of for Ideate Annotate. And you can see there's the health check sample file, Excel file that's delivered with Ideate Automation. And then I'm going to, just like I did earlier, I'm going to pick a folder that I want to export this information into. So we'll just say Automation Export. And again, I can have the file name where I could have it be date, or I could use a specific parameter to be able to name that. So in this case, I'm just going to go into this, this health check folder that you see here, where I'm going to, all of these links, link definitions are going to get exported into that Excel file. So I just go ahead and select this the same way, say save and run. And again, just for the essence of time, we've truncated this a little bit. So it's
good because we only have 4 minutes.
I know, I'm looking, it's fast. But what's great about this is it allows you to basically look at not only the data, but you can specify with the thresholds. I'm trying to remember what's the name we were talking about, not the thresholds, but it's like if anything's like over 200 warnings, make it red. Yes, threshold. The threshold, okay. Or criteria, I'm just trying to think. But you can, that's all customizable within that specific Excel spreadsheet. So, this now that's completed, right? And you can see it just like from before. I can review that information in the log file and see exactly the information within that, very similar to a Revit journal file. But in this case, I'm just going to double click on the Excel file that was created. And notice that it's giving me this information like the date, right? And we also have the information about the threshold values for if it's over a certain amount of warnings or over a certain amount of issues on a sheet. And then we're using pivot tables to summarize that information. So here are the threshold values, right? So I can say, oh, you know what, views on sheets, if it's over 50, flag it for me. All the blue tabs down below were automatically created from Ideate BIMLink. All the green tabs that are coming up here were created from Ideate Explorer, and all of the orange tabs are coming from IdeateApps. So that was all that was sort of put together and then summarized in a very nice way with this summary tab. And speaking of that summary tab, once you have that information, what would you like to do with it? Well, you want to link it into your Revit project, typically on a home page, right? So you can use Ideate Sticky to link that sort of nice overview right on the home page. So in this case, here's an example of doing that for the Snowden data set. We also have a workflow for Power BI. So it also creates an Excel spreadsheet, but that spreadsheet is consumable by Power BI. So you'll notice that here you can do some nice charts. The blue is coming from Ideate BIMLink. The green is coming from Explorer again. The orange is coming from Ideate Annotate, part of IdeateApps. And if you want to review the Power BI, again, send an email to support@ideatesoftware.com, and we can give you the Power BI template. But I think one of the main things here is that we're creating consistent results every single time. So you set this up, you set it up one time, and then you're good to go. So it's 12:59.
There you go. Awesome.
So we want to thank you very much for your time. This presentation has been recorded. One last thing I want to ask people is that when we close out of the webinar, you'll be presented with a survey link. There's only 4 questions. They're very simple. And the questions are basically, did this help you understand some of the workflows from Ideate Software? And what are your favorite tips for Ideate Software? And also some suggestions maybe for some future webinars. So we really want to thank you for your attention today. We appreciate it. And like I said, we are excited to be here live in Washington, D.C.
Nice, and thanks for all the great questions. I think we got them all answered, but please feel free to type more in. Thank you.
Great. All right. Well, I think we'll go ahead and I'll close the webinar then. Or do we have one last question that came in?
Nope, just a thank you.
Okay, excellent. Well, and hopefully, I know we're in this conference room, so hopefully the volume was good and you were able to hear everything clearly. So have a great day, and make sure you visit our website for more information.